We're talking about the argument of biology unfairness by allowing transgender athletes to compete in competitions. Yuval, your take?
Look, if sports associations are committed to ensuring an environment of competition that's safe, healthy, and free of discrimination, they cannot continue to dodge around this issue or even make a ruling like this, because we need to make sure that they ensure that transgender athletes can participate safely. Advocates for transgender inclusion argue that not enough studies have been made or done on the impact of transition on physical performance, and that elite athletes are often physical outliers in any case. For example, most of my coaches, when I competed in sports, were women. Many of the people who I do CrossFit with are women, and they're a lot stronger than me. So because I'm a male, am I supposed to be able to do better than them? I mean, where is this coming from? Most of the people who are talking about this are focusing on the male to female transgender athlete communities. And I think this truly comes from this misogynist belief that men are stronger, are better, are faster. Again, I have to say, with my experiences, I have seen women who are faster and stronger than me. We see it in the Olympics. So what's the big issue with letting somebody compete in the correct category according to their gender presentation?
Yes,
I think this just falls back to misogyny.
International Olympic Committee President Thomas Bach said in this past May that sports cannot have a one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to transgender inclusion. Yuval is showing some greater flexibility. It's not black or white. We all agree that we are moving towards inclusion, but we need to, again, exercise some flexibility here. Sure, absolutely. It's not a black or white. It's a definite, there are definitely different ways to look at this situation. But here are two different things. Uri said something about biology when talking about the competition. And India mentioned actual scientific studies. So I think we need to focus on the science and not the stigma. We need to look at the scientific studies that have been done on athletes who have transitioned and look at what their performance is like, what their bodies are like after they have transitioned. This policy, it's a very unfortunate thing that FINA has made this ruling, because first of all, trans people are not taking over the sports. They're just trying to be part of the sports. This is an incredibly discriminatory policy that's attempting to fix a problem that doesn't really exist. We need to focus on the science and not some sort of moral panic because of Leah Thomas and these other athletes. It's deeply discriminatory, harmful, and unscientific.
Say about the can I comment?
Please,
can I comment?
Of course.
Yeah. So Yuval, first of all, I think I didn't use any stigma in my words. Instead, I shared a lot of respect to trans people and trans athletes. But if we take, as you just said, if we take how much a percentage of the population, world population, is elite sports athlete? How much of these are actually transgender? We are discussing a wider phenomenon that requires us to make so much wider change to the sports world, or instead try to create the right inclusive environment, maybe the right inclusive competitive environment.
It's very unfortunate to say this misinformation that's being pushed about. And I understand why it happens. Trans is such a complex subject to talk about, even in this dynamic here. And I think people, when you talk about trans women, and you know, some people will use the phrase, you know, biological males against biological females, and they assume, and again, I completely understand it, it's not any slight on anyone, that in their mind's eye, they're seeing a regular man taking on a woman, which is clearly unfair. But the stats, I keep going back to the science and sporting history and results, and there are no trans successes. We're actually probably the worst demographic for sporting success, trans women.
The broader debate here, this so very delicate issue is often being hijacked, especially in the U.S., but elsewhere for sure, hijacked for political means. It's become the epicenter of the fight between conservatives and progressives. Maybe we're allowing too many politicians to try and make political capital out of a social issue at its core.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's once again, it's when it comes to the stigma. And Uli, I hear what you said, and you also applauded people who are trans. So that wasn't a direct attack to you, just to respond there. Yes, back to the point, this is becoming politicized. We need to look at the science, and we don't have enough science that is publicly shared yet because people are just responding to the stigma of what they assume. I'm an inclusion activist. I would love to see men, women, anybody compete together, and to show one person competing with another person. That is really my hope as an inclusion activist. So that's first of all in my mind. But yeah, I think we need to focus on more scientific studies to say, well, how does this person perform compared to that person who performs, especially when we look at that 0.1% or whatever it is of these elite athletes. We need to look at the science. We need to look at the athletes themselves, and not the politicians nor the religious leaders who are adding stigma in their beliefs to something they don't know enough about.
Yuval, 10 seconds concluding remarks.
People in the public eye, including our athletes, do have a responsibility to make a statement, to represent themselves, to represent their teammates, which ultimately means that they do have influence on our society. So I very much do think that our athletes and our sports teams can and should make those comments.
Yuval David, Miss India Willoughby, Andrew Levy, thank you so much for speaking to us.